The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services have announced that it will deny visas if they find any anti-U.S. or anti-Semitic posts by you on social media. So essentially, under the Trump administration, your social media accounts of Instagram, X, YouTube, Snapchat, and Facebook will all be under surveillance for any post that is anti-Jew or leads to physical harassment of Jewish individuals. The new guidelines will apply to individuals applying for permanent resident status, international students, and immigrants. Now, this announcement, remember, comes amid the Trump administration revoking visas of hundreds of international students across the United States of America. However, advocacy groups like Blue Sky and Nexus, including those who fight anti-Semitism, have criticized the decision, saying it will not help their case. They also refer to the First Amendment that guarantees and protects free speech under the U.S. Constitution. But here's what Trump supporters say. It isn't new in today's digital era for authorities to keep a check on social media, and more so when the host country reserves the right to decide on the laws of the land. Let's try and understand this from American voices themselves. On the show tonight, I'm joined by David Sofair. He's a Republican strategist. Ray Locker, journalist and author, joining us from the U.S., as well as Purvi Chotani, U.S. immigration attorney at LawQuest, is also joining us. Good evening and namaskar to all three of you. David Sofair, let me begin with you. Why? Why this decision? Isn't it enough that the Trump administration is already going all out against immigrants? What is the need to monitor and track people through their social media accounts as well?
Good evening, Shreya. Thank you very much for having me. First of all, I'd like to point out that I've actually taken the time to read extensively today about what this actually means. And this is according to the Immigrations and Citizenship website. So it broadly states out that anybody on social media that has connections and is in direct support to three identified groups. So that is Hamas, that is the Houthis, and that is Iran-backed factions. There's freedom of speech, and then there is terrorism and linked terrorism. So once you really peel back the onion here, and once you read the whole thing, you can see that this is a very good thing for American security and American democracy. American democracy and freedom of speech here is not being attacked. What's being restored is safety within our country. We are really repairing the country from years of terrible immigration policy. We are not anti-immigrant, we are pro-safety. And this is another great example of the administration making America safe again. We need to know who's who, and terrorism has no place in our country, and this is an excellent tool to vet out who's who.
But, you know, the argument, David Sofair, is the fact that you're equating terrorists with immigrants who are perhaps, you know, voicing their support for a particular cause, which they think is the right cause for them to voice their support for. But let me get in Ray Locker on this. Ray, what is your view on this? You know, what David Sofair said, that national security first and that we're pro-immigrants, but they need to know where to draw the line. They need to know their limits in the United States of America.
This may surprise you and David, but I agree with him on a lot of these points. I mean, look, I ran a think tank for a while that studied Muslim-based terrorism. And one of the things we did was we looked at the social media, Facebook accounts of some people who said, oh, we love everybody, you know, and then you find out that they like all these Hamas-related groups. They have an obvious connection. They're friends with those people. And so you're like, why are these people being allowed to come into the country? So sometimes that's a legitimate way to go. You know, you need to know more about the people who you're letting in the country. And I have worked on stories in the past where it's been like, who let this guy in the United States? He's obviously a problem. That said, you have cases where you don't know who's applying the standard, you know, and so that's the major issue. If you post something and say, I don't like what Israel is doing in Gaza, is that how somehow going to be, you know, construed as pro-Hamas? I don't think so. And that's where we're running into a lot of problems where people say, oh, you're an anti-Semite. Well, no, I'm not. I
Yeah.
just don't like what Israel is doing here or there, or I don't support their government. And there's often the blurring of the two. And you have to be very careful to avoid doing that.
Well, it certainly has come as a surprise, Ray Locker, that you agree with David Sofair, one of those rare instances, perhaps the first time that I'm seeing on my show. But David Sofair, the fact of the matter is that, all right, we can agree that this is important. This is, important for the United States of America or any country to do so. But it also raises the question as to how you define anti-Semitism. That's a gray area. Like Ray said, if you just say a statement as general as, I don't like what Israel is doing in Gaza, that can be misconstrued as well.
No, I mean, again, I'd have to refer you to the Department of Immigration and Citizens website. It doesn't say anything about that. To Mr. Locker's point, it has to do with who's who and who's connected to these groups. So there can be clear cases of people that are connected to these identified groups who will not be welcomed to participate in American immigration, visa, or visit, whether that's student or chain or in any sort of faction. So it's a safety concern. Again, we are not trying to take away freedom of speech. We are trying to make America safe. And this is not the first time the government has, gone through social media to identify threats. So the threat could be on the government, it could be on an individual. Then that no longer becomes freedom of speech, and it is no longer protected by the First Amendment. It becomes a crime, right? So I think this is in my personal view, I think this is a good safety measure, especially of where we are today. When it comes to immigration and global and domestic terrorism. I mean, it's an uncertain time. So this is, again, I see this as a good thing.
Okay. Okay, let me get in Purvi into this conversation. Purvi, you're an immigration expert, and obviously there have been concerns since the Trump 2.0 administration began that, there's this rising sentiment against immigrants. But in this case, of course, there have been certain instances where Donald Trump has been right in saying what he said, and there has been support for terror groups that have been designated terror groups by the United States of America. In such cases, where perhaps innocent immigrants could also be, sort of caught in this cobweb, what would you suggest? What would you advise to the immigrants, especially the younger ones who are so passionate about all of these issues that we grapple with every day?
So the younger folk, especially the ones who are so gung-ho on social media, happily voicing their views, whether anyone's interested or not, they're very vocal on social media. And sometimes they just, without reading the full post, will forward it or like it or comment on it. And that is a really dangerous situation because the notice clearly says that it's not only that you make those comments, but if you, the way it's going to pan out is that even if you repost it or like somebody else's comment, it could have a negative immigration impact on you. So my advice to everybody is please be prudent, watch yourselves, watch what you say and write and comment on. And this wouldn't have happened 10 years ago when we were all not living our lives on social media. We were much safer then. But this is a real problem in the current world. And I don't think that the United States is wrong in doing what they are doing. It's just that the immigrants will have to be extra careful to make sure they don't get caught in the dragnet.
But then, Ray Locker, come in on this. Then how should immigrants, should they be at all voicing their opinions, for the fear that this or some other statement of theirs could be misconstrued and they would end up, getting deported? I mean, how should an immigrant live then?
They should live, mind their own business, do their work, study if they're studying, and get about life. So, for example, if you go to some of the Middle Eastern countries, which are also totalitarian government, would you make anti-Allah comments or anti-government comments? You wouldn't, because you know that you'll first be deported or put into jail and then be heard, if at all. So we are used to that type of behavior, that type of constraint in other countries. But in America, we've taken freedom of speech for granted. And that is where we are getting into trouble now. So and I think that some innocent commentators also will get penalized, and they may have just really made some innocent comments, just like what the gentleman before me said, that, you know, what's going on in the Gaza area is not very pleasant. That also could be construed to be anti-Semitism. And my fear is this, that the government is likely to use artificial intelligence to trace these comments, because I don't see how they could go through those volumes of social media with just pairs of human eyes. So they're going to use artificial intelligence, and the artificial intelligence is going to pick up on these type of mild comments also, just because it has a buzzword or it has a string of words that has been programmed into the AI, or what the AI is used to see, and they could also get caught. My bigger fear is that.
Yeah, interesting point that you make there. And before I go to Ray Locker, let me get in David Sofair to respond to you. David, you know, a very correct concern that in the age of, you know, in this digital era that we're living in and how algorithms work, it, you know, puts up pretty much every immigrant at risk of, you know, their statements being misconstrued, especially with the fact that, like Purvi is saying, with the use of artificial intelligence now under the Trump administration.
Look, let's be clear here. The administration and the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Immigration and Passport Control is not going after students that have a pro-Palestinian message. They're going after people that have direct links to terrorist organizations. It's very clear in what's going on there. So now the media has taken this out of context, and they're bringing it out with a broader brush, because everything that Trump does and everything that he implements is somehow wrong or bad, or of course, xenophobic.
But David, are you telling me that the students have not been alerted by the Trump administration, that Donald Trump has not said that anybody who's, supporting the Gaza cause on American university and college campuses will be deported? That threat has not been given, that direction has not been given by the Trump administration?
No, absolutely not. I mean, look, the permitted protests for Gaza are still going on. There are students that engage in that every single day. They have the absolute right to do so. Now, as soon as violence gets into it, as soon as obstruction gets into it, as soon as hate speech gets into it, right, which there are clear-cut examples of that, then that's something else. And then if it's backed by a group that is a known terror group as well, that's something else. So, that's what we're referring to here. We're not taking away your right to protest. We believe in protest, and we believe in freedom of speech, and we believe in students having all these rights. They're not clearing out the protests. They're clearing out obstruction. They're clearing out links to terror. They're clearing out, and they're clearing out all these things, which is a good thing. We're making America secure again. We're making America safe again, and we're also
Okay. Ray Locker, do you also think that in this time and era that we're staying in, we're living in, that line between freedom of speech and responsibility has blurred? A lot of youngsters, especially who are out there protesting, also have to have some sort of sense of responsibility when they are in a foreign land and supporting a cause that host country is against.
Oh, absolutely. Look, if I went to another country, I'd want to know the lay of the land there. I'd want to know how to behave and what to say and what not to say. Look, there are parts of the United States I go to where I know that I'm not going to go out in public wearing a Kamala Harris t-shirt because it won't be popular. So everybody edits what they say and what they do depending on the situation they're in. And I think young people in the United States, if they come from another country and hold certain views, they need to be conscious of how they express those views, just in terms of their own safety and how to get along. But look, we've seen in the past, or certainly in 3 months since Trump has been president, he says a lot of things. He does a lot of things, and a lot of times an objective standard is not adhered to. That, he says, let's get rid of all these people, and that's what people understand based on what he says, not necessarily the letter of what he says. So he creates a lot of this confusion. We've seen it with tariffs and other things. And so that's why there's this sense that people might be victimized. Now we need to see what happens when the law is applied, if or this policy is applied, how it shakes out. Look, we got guys who have an autism tattoo, and the next thing you know, they're in El Salvador because they're considered to be part of some Venezuelan gang, or they're a gay hairdresser and they have some kind of tattoo, and all of a sudden they're considered a gang member and they get deported. So there's a lot of gray area, and there's a lot of times when these policies get abused, and we need to watch out for that.
Ray, you just snatched away the ultimate happiness that you gave all of us, that you agreed with David's affair for once by saying that this is a gray area, and, just the fact that this needs to be sorted out and Donald Trump needs to walk the talk. But come on, you can give him some credit this time around because you yourself are agreeing with the kind of decision that has been taken. He's not such a dictator as all of you have made him out to be.
Well, a broken clock is right twice a day. So, I mean, I think in this situation,
it's been raised right
in these specific areas, that he isn't right.
Okay. Purvi, comment on this. How do you see this moving forward? There is, of course, a rising anti-immigrant sentiment in United States of America for several reasons, not just national security, but the fact that Trump has to cater to his vote bank in America also is factored in. But for immigrants especially, how do you see this moving forward, considering now their social media accounts will also be under surveillance?
And the thing with social media is if you delete it also, it may not just get deleted, right? It'll be there somewhere in the web. And they can find it if they want to find it.
Yeah.
So in the visa process for many years, many visa applicants are asked to fill an additional social media form. So that's been the norm, but it's at the discretion of the consular officers. All visa applicants don't. I even tell general visa applicants and general immigration benefit seekers that what will the officers see on the internet if they were to Google you? What are they going to see? Go and do a reality check yourself. So at this time, this is a good thing to do for everybody who may be already in an immigrant status, temporary immigrant status, or who may be seeking an immigrant status in the future. Because let's say we're talking about the green card people. So people are applying for the green card, of course, will be vetted. But there are people who are already on a green card and living over there. They're not likely to seek an immigrant benefit very quickly. But let's say they've lived there for 5 years and now they're applying for the citizenship. That's an immigration benefit. And it's at that time that the officer can find their social media comments and deny them their citizenship. So you could really get into trouble. So you must do a cleanup and a check and see how to manage your reputation, how to manage your online image so that you don't get tripped up. But there's one thing that I want to say, where the gentleman before me just mentioned that this is all not going to be done with one sweeping broad stroke. There's one word in the announcement that causes me concern, and it is at the discretion of the USCIS. That gives them a lot of leeway, that gives them a lot of subjective powers to make decisions. Something may seem anti-Semitic to one person, but it may not be anti-Semitic to another person. So it depends on which officer gets it and what his anti-Semitism meter is. So that's a room for a lot of discretionary power over there. And the 4 words that they've used in the notices, they are going to be vetting for endorsing, espousing, promoting, or supporting. And that's why I said a simple like to a comment also could get you into trouble.
Yeah, let me get David Sofair to respond to you. David, respond to what Purvi is saying, coupled with the fact that, today it's anti-Semitism, tomorrow it might be anti-Trump statements, or any anti-Trump post that you like will get you deported.
The two don't conflate, as that's not a national security concern. So again, we're an administration that's actively vetting immigrants to do with terrorists. They have the groups named on the site. We're looking for certain things. It's all on the site again. And your previous panelist said a great thing as well for advice to her clients, and to young people in general. If you're applying for a job or if you're applying for a university, be careful what you say on social media. At the end of the day, it's you can't just say whatever you want on there, and there are consequences. But there are certainly consequences for going and supporting these identified groups in the United States and in other countries as well. So, we are actively trying to make America a safe place, and we're doing that by many channels.
Okay.
And this is one of them.
Okay. I think the bottom line is then that freedom comes with responsibility, and it works both ways. If immigrants have to be responsible, Donald Trump administration also has the freedom right now to implement laws, but it also has to come up with a lot of sense of responsibility and of cleaning out and weeding out the gray areas in all of these laws. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much to you all three, Ray Locker, Purvi Chetani and David Sofair, for joining us on Global Mirror and sharing your perspective. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, viewers, before I wrap up, I'd like to thank